Hello, I'm Esther Gidhu-Ewart. It's Wednesday, November 2nd. This is Africa 54.
Somalia's endless drought has driven people from homes and farms to displaced persons camps. We'll have an on-scene report. Anti-UN DRC protesters burn MONUSCO peacekeepers' vehicles while Kenya sends in troops to help hold back the M23. Nigeria amps up virtual medicine with local digital tech firm Clemac at the forefront. Founder Chima Amadi talks to VOA's Paul Ndiho.
We begin in South Africa, where the chief African Union mediator, Olusegun Obasanjo, is leading negotiations aimed at ending a devastating two-year conflict between the Ethiopian government and rebel authorities in Tigray. Since the negotiations began last Tuesday, intense fighting has continued unabated in Tigray, where government troops backed by the Eritrean army and regional forces have been waging artillery fire and airstrikes, capturing a string of towns from the rebels. Joining me live via Skype from Pretoria with the latest news on the peace talks is journalist Linda Giftash. Linda, where do things stand in the peace talk process?
It's been a historic day today. They have just announced that the warring parties, the Ethiopian government and the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, have reached an agreement. It means that there's going to be a cessation of hostilities. Guns will finally be silenced in the northern part of the country, where the war has been raging for almost 2 years as of tomorrow. So this is huge news for that region in terms of making a step towards the peace process. They are still announcing the details of the agreement, but they are, as you can see, they are discussing this historic moment, congratulating both parties for coming to an agreement after such tense talks. Talks have been underway for over a week now, and they've been very quiet in terms of what has been discussed. There's been very little information that was released. We didn't know who the parties were specifically, who was talking, representing both sides. However, now we do know that, again, that there's going to be a cessation of hostilities in this conflict. They've agreed to disarmament, and it means that humanitarian aid can finally get back to the region where the United Nations has warned 5.2 million people are facing severe hunger right now.
We know, Linda, if they have given a timeline as to when the cessation of these hostilities can begin.
They have not quite yet given a timeline specifically. However, with the signing of the agreement, implementation, they said, is the next major step. They are also saying this agreement, while monumental for the country and for the entire Horn of Africa, as it's causing instability across the region, is important. And but you know, it's only the first step towards actually achieving peace. The first, and they're saying that this is the beginning of what is going to be lengthy discussions still to be had.
Linda, we know that there has been a long moment of people waiting from Ethiopia, from the diaspora, including those in South Africa. What have they been telling you? What were they looking forward to today?
Well, people have been watching and waiting, hoping for some news. Originally, the talks were supposed to end on Sunday. However, they did continue through until today. The diaspora simply want to see their homeland in peace. I've spoken to so many people, and it's been heartbreaking for them to look back at their country where they still have friends, they still have relatives, where they don't see divisions between Tigrayan or Ethiopian of any other region of the country. They see themselves as one people. And to see their country at war has been a heartbreaking process for people away. It's dissuaded people from being able to go back to visit. So people have just been sitting and waiting and hoping that peace can finally be achieved. So this, I'm sure, is going to be welcome news to the diaspora.
Linda, thank you so much. I know it's still going on. Let's listen to the live feed coming out of Pretoria.
The use of force serves to destroy lives, livelihoods, infrastructure, African Union that as a continent, we must give much more focused attention to preventative interventions, structures, and mechanisms. Peace building is much more difficult than waging a war. The real heroes are those who work towards building peace and sustaining it. We therefore humbly call on the leaders of both sides to continue to work toward maintaining this peace through implementing the agreement in full, as they have committed to do in front of us. The engagement to build stability, to sustain peace, must continue in Ethiopia and lead to the securing of an enduring peace. We are honored as South Africa to have been the host.
We're going back to Linda. What did you say, Matoka?
To provide support to the African Union, working closely with the facilitation team to ensure that peace is indeed maintained in our sister country, Ethiopia. It is absolutely imperative that we thank the facilitators and the observers for the hard work that has been undertaken. We thank His Excellency, President Olusegun Obasanjo, His Excellency, former President Uhuru Kenyatta, and Her Excellency, former Deputy President Tumsile Lambo. We also thank colleagues of the African Union Commission and all the observers, as well as the resource personnel who have helped steer the talks. It is our hope as the people and government of South Africa that we are very soon going to be enjoying a celebration for the people of Ethiopia, and indeed with all the people of Africa, because this agreement offers the hope that it is possible that as Africans we can silence the doubt throughout the continent. Our President, President Ramaphosa, has directed me to congratulate all of you and to confirm his government and our country's readiness to continue playing any positive role that you may wish us to play.
Linda, thank you so much for the update. We were able to get a little bit of the live feed. We'll follow up with you. Thank you for your reporting. Linda Giftash reporting for us from Pretoria, South Africa. Somali authorities are scrambling to avert famine from a record drought that has affected nearly 8 million people, half the population of that country. The largest city in Somalia's southwest state, Baidoa, is bearing the brunt of the drought as thousands of families flee starvation in the countryside to displaced camps in the city. Aid groups and authorities are pleading for international help to prevent further loss of life. Mohammed Sheikh Noor reports from Baidoa.
The UN's World Food Programme says Somalia's worst drought in nearly half a century has wiped out millions of livestock and made nearly 8 million people, including 1.5 million children, face hunger. The unprecedented failure of a fifth rainy season in a row has displaced more than 1 million Somalis from the countryside to the outskirts of cities like Baidoa. Many have no option but to walk, and the most vulnerable don't always survive.
Our journey took us 10 days, during which 3 of my children died of hunger. We have not received any aid for the 3 months we have been here. Our only source of income is the firewood we cut and sell. If we don't sell any, we are unable to eat and sometimes go hungry all night.
Children under the age of 5, the most vulnerable to malnutrition, receive what care is available at Baidoa Hospital.
We have experienced a severe drought, during which we have not been able to grow our crops for 4 consecutive seasons due to lack of rain. Our livestock has been wiped out, and my son is suffering from malnutrition.
Hospital admissions for children are rising quickly.
Malnourished children are at an alarmingly high rate. We were admitting about 150 to 200 children per month. Now the number of children per month has reached 300 to 400.
Somalia's southwest state government is working closely with aid agencies to lessen the impact of the drought and try to prevent famine. State Minister of Humanitarian and Disaster Management, Abdi Nasser Abdi Aroush, is coordinating relief efforts.
Our goal is to ensure that no famine occurs in this country, and we expect God to help in our efforts to ensure that it does not happen. It is important that we do all that is possible to prevent people from dying of hunger. As a government, we have been entrusted with the responsibility by our people.
But in the makeshift camps for displaced, there are few visible signs of adequate aid for drought victims. The last famine in Somalia in 2011 killed 250,000 people. If more food aid doesn't arrive soon, aid groups say another famine in Somalia could be even worse. Mohamed Sheikh Noor for VOA News, Baidoa, Somalia.
And joining me now here in the studio is Solomon Abate. He is a VOA Horn of Africa acting chief. Solomon, it's a big day for Ethiopia today. We just had a press conference live coming out of Pretoria. We had Linda Giftash give us a little bit of the update. Now they are talking about cessation of hostilities. We don't know exactly when they're going to start, whether it's today, tomorrow, when. What are you hearing from the ground?
Thank you, Esther, for inviting me, first of all. As you've said, it is a big day for Ethiopia. It's a big day for Africa. And that's what President Obasanjo said. Today is the beginning of a new dawn for the Horn of Africa and Africa as a whole. So now the barrels are silent again and the battlefields are quiet, it seems. Even the Prime Minister of Ethiopia visited one of the localities in southern Ethiopia where thousands waited for him and greeted him there. And he announced that at the end the peace would be reached. And President Obasanjo then appeared and announced, broke this news. So now, you know, from the sound and from what the leaders of the two delegations were saying, you hear some kind of commitment, initial commitment, but both are somehow expressed, you know, between the lines, some kind of skepticism. Both call for immediate implementation of the agreement, and both say the spirit and the word must go together, and they expressed their support for that. Regarding the public reaction, our reporters in Ethiopia, in Tigray, I mean in general in Ethiopia, in different parts of the country, including Mekelle, are collecting public opinion. They are doing the vox pop. We will hear soon what the people would say about that. There are some unclear points, as you've said. We will try to find out. We
don't know exactly when the cessation will take effect, but you say it is quiet in Mekelle, it's quiet in Tigray, there's no fighting today.
We don't hear any news of fighting going on today.
But
by the way, tomorrow would be exactly 2 years since the war broke.
You did say something that kind of, you know, gives an idea that there's not exactly a very smooth cohesion in terms of is this over or it's not over yet? I did see one of our reporters quoting Prime Minister Abiy yesterday saying that there has been heavy interference in these talks. I don't know if you know much about that and what he meant by heavy interference.
That was yesterday, Esther. We're talking about today. After
interference in the talks, that is.
Yeah, but after the talks have been concluded, the leader of the talks, the leader of the panel, the AU panel, has spoken, and the leaders of the two delegations have spoken. They expressed commitment, both, and they say cessation of hostilities has been reached.
I guess we could smile,
Yeah,
Solomon.
so.
I think it's great news, and we are looking forward to seeing, Ethiopia become the giant of the Horn of Africa as it has been. Solomon, it's a pleasure to have you in studio with us.
Thank you, Esther.
Solomon Abate is VOA Horn of Africa acting chief. Now, protesters stormed a United Nations base in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo on Tuesday night and set fire to UN vehicles while demanding that peacekeepers depart from the region. VOA's Ndiho reports.
Hundreds of young people in Goma torched UN vehicles Tuesday night, protesting the presence of the United Nations mission in Congo, or MONUSCO. The fires started after rumors about the UN allegedly transporting rebels from the M23 group spread among the displaced people and residents in the city. Earlier on Tuesday, MONUSCO announced a strategic and tactical withdrawal from the embattled Rumangabo, where the M23 is trying to advance. The mission posted on Twitter that the decision was taken in consultation with our partners to prepare the next steps better together. The situation in eastern Congo has worsened in recent months, and on Saturday, rebels seized control of two major towns and doubled the territory they hold after fierce fighting. The M23 rose to prominence more than a decade ago when its fighters seized Goma, the largest city in Congo's east, which sits along the border with Rwanda. The rebels last weekend also seized the town of Kiwanji, effectively cutting off Goma from the upper half of the province. The action prompted the Congolese Foreign Ministry to expel Rwandan ambassador and recall its interim acting ambassador from Kigali. In July, Rwanda and Congo agreed to dial back tensions after Angola mediated discussions with Rwandan President Paul Kagame and Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi. At that time, Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi hoped this process would lead to an immediate ceasefire. Nearly 200,000 people have been displaced over the past year, even before the latest surge in violence, which is now being blamed for forcing at least 40,000 people to flee in a week. Meanwhile, Kenya is deploying troops, the first contingent of a regional peacekeeping force to the eastern Congo. Kenyan President William Ruto presided over the flagging ceremony in Nairobi on Wednesday.
As neighbors, with various interlinkages, the destiny of DRC is intertwined with ours. We all have a stake in a stable Democratic Republic of Congo, and its security is an obligation that we commit our best effort to achieve.
The force will be part of the East African Community bloc, which Congo recently joined, and is working towards deploying a peacekeeping force in eastern Congo's restive provinces. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Wednesday, November 2nd, is United Nations World Impunity Day. It highlights a call for an end to crimes against journalists and freedom of the press. According to the 2022 Committee to Protect Journalists Global Impunity Index, the vast majority of killers of journalists get away with murder. Somalia is the worst offender on the index for the 8th straight year. Other countries on the top index include South Sudan, Afghanistan, and Iraq. And joining me now is Harun Maruf, a VOA senior editor. Harun, tell us more about Impunity Day in Somalia and what it is like to be a journalist in Somalia.
As you said, Somalia is a very dangerous place to be based as a journalist. We have just seen last Saturday journalists being caught up in one of the biggest explosions in the country. One of our reporters, Abdul Qadir Mohammed Abdullah, was injured. He lost 2 fingers and another finger was broken. He has shrapnels all over his body. Another journalist was injured working for Reuters, but also 2 other journalists died. One of them was working for local television, Mohammed Isa Kuna. Very sad story. He had a very traumatic upbringing. Also a journalist who came back after being out of Somalia for 15 years. He happened to be in Mogadishu for about 4 days, and he was caught up in that explosion. But dozens of Somali journalists were caught up in explosions carried out by Al-Shabaab. Some other journalists were specifically targeted. They had explosive devices planted in their vehicles. One of them, in November, a very prominent journalist who was investigating Al-Shabaab was killed because a suicide bomber has blown himself very nearby. So Somali journalists have been really suffering for a long time. Since 2007, that's when Al-Shabaab officially came out and started explosives and assassinations. Over nearly 70 journalists were killed. And most of these journalists, not all of them have died in explosions, but some of them have died in gunshots. Some of them accidentally met their death. For instance, last month, a young journalist was killed while he was covering
so it looks like very targeted by the Al-Shabaab, very targeted by this terrorist group. But Harun, again, what would be the #1 demand then for journalists in Somalia to the authorities to be able to do their work freely?
That has been the key question, because so many times authorities in Somalia have promised to investigate attacks and killings against journalists. They have also promised reforms. For instance, the Somali government has been using the 1964 penal code to prosecute journalists. And that penal code really has been criminalizing freedom of expression. Despite their promises to reform, it hasn't taken place. At this time, as we speak, the head of the Somali Journalists Union is under investigation by the government, and he's been briefly detained last month.
Yeah. Right. Harun, thank you very much for your analysis on this and your reporting. Harun Maruf is a VOA senior editor with the Somali service. It's time now for our technology report, and joining us now is our tech reporter, Paul Ndiho. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Esther. The COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated changes in the way medicine is practiced, as medical care is increasingly begins with an online consultation rather than a face-to-face meeting. In Nigeria, digital health technology firm Clemac is helping to connect patients with doctors and pharmacies through its virtual medical services. I spoke to Chima Amadi, founder of Clemac Digital Health and a former Mandela Washington Fellow, about their service. Welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Paul. Nice to be here.
You are leveraging technology to improve the health services in Nigeria. What is it that you do?
I run a health tech company called Clemac Digital Health. So we leverage on tech to improve access to healthcare for Nigerians. We leverage on services like telemedicine, e-pharmacy, prescription refills, and helping people who need emergency health services to have access to hospitals where they can have emergency health needs. So this issue really became very, very, very prominent during the COVID pandemic, due to the lockdowns and due to the shortage of healthcare workers in hospitals, and due to some pharmacies not being able to meet the growing demand of people flocking to the pharmacies. So we'll try to make the life of the average patient easy, improve their quality of life, save costs, and ensure they have adequate access to quality healthcare.
How easy is it for ordinary folks, ordinary people in Nigeria, to use this kind of technology to help with their healthcare needs?
You know, in Africa, within the past 10 to 15 years, the awareness about technology has really been improving. For example, you talk about smartphone usage has increased, unlike what you had before, where people used like the analog phones like the Nokia and the basic Samsung. And of course, the tech industry in Nigeria and Kenya specifically has been growing rapidly. So, and then COVID has also made it people to be much more aware of what you can do, implications of healthcare. You know, people switched to Zoom, from in-person meetings to Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all of that. So that awareness has really been within the youths and, of course, the majority of the population. So it's not really so difficult for them to be aware. But the only challenge they're having, because of the cost of internet, right? So especially those in rural communities who seems a little bit left out from the service. But what we are trying to do now is to create another system, more like a SMS shortcode system, to include them in the service.
You're a service provider. And for you to connect with those people they need access to the internet, but the internet is very, very expensive. So what can you do in the interim to make sure that you tap into that market?
Basically, what would be a lot of advocacy, so that people, in terms of the government and the private sector, to help, because these are like basic social infrastructure. But in the meantime, I think that's where our new service we are talking about, the short code and the SMS system, because when that comes into play, you really don't have so much option about the internet and, of course, the power outage. You can send a simple text from your phone, and you still have more access to these services.
How did you come up with this incredible idea?
I'll start with the challenge. Actually, I lost my dad due to poor access to healthcare when I was still a teenager.
I'm very sorry about that.
Yeah, so that was really what I felt, okay, fine, something should be done about this, because obviously if he had the access to internet he needed, he wouldn't be late.
There is a lot of competition when it comes to the healthcare sector in Nigeria. Everybody is going into this space because there is so much to be done in that space. How are you dealing with that competition?
For myself and my co-founder, we have so much experience in the Nigerian healthcare space. At least I've been in the healthcare space for the past 7 years. So going to 8 years now. So apart from that, the collaboration is key. So for example, the Mandela Washington Fellowship gave me an opportunity to collaborate with other fellows in different countries. You
recently won a prestigious grant from the Mandela Washington Fellowship. You are one of the few Africans selected to come and participate here in Washington, D.C. and across the United States. Tell us more about that.
It was really a fun experience, was really intriguing. Because this is my first time to the United States. I haven't been to the United States before. I got the opportunity to network with the Americans, understood the business model of a lot of Fortune 500 companies, got to meet with like minds, experience the US culture, the diversity in America, and some of the history in America, which I plan to take back home and, of course, make my organization much, much better. And, of course, networking with my fellow Africans from different, Africa has up to 54 countries or more than, and to network with this group of people, because it's opened doors for future collaborations, future partnerships, and future impact globally.
Thank you so much for your time.
Sure, you're welcome. Anytime you're in Nigeria.
That's today's Tech Report. Back to you, Esther.
And thank you, Paul, for that report. And we say good night to you. Thank you for watching Africa 54.